So did we watch the Laureus Awards?
I haven't got a clue what you're talking about.
I am actually a judge of the Laureus Awards, but I have to confess it passed me by as well.
What is it actually, guys?
Well, it's been going 25 years, but it doesn't seem to have caught off. People aren't watching it like film buffs watch the Oscars. Do you even know any of the winners?
I discovered the winners at the Football Blacklist Awards last night, just by talking to somebody who'd been there. So Simone Biles, Sportsman of the Year. And do you know who the male Sportsman of the Year was?
Mondo Duplantis, the Swedish star of the Olympics.
Yeah, the pole vaulter. Fantastic. So these winners are both from the Paris Olympics. But you said 25 years, Rob. What is laureate? What is the point of it?
Everyone likes an award ceremony, but incredible. Sport is loved and watched by so many around the world, but sport has never managed to get a big ceremony. Well, an overall one. Obviously, the FIFA Best gets attention, the Ballon d'Or. Maybe it's one thing for the IOC themselves to organise. Or maybe a Sport Unlocked Global Sports Awards.
We should definitely have that.
Or, with your skills now at being an award judge, a category, you could show us the ropes.
How to judge. We'll get all the winners on here. Big glitzy ceremony. Hello, welcome again to Sport Unlocked with Martyn Ziegler from The Times, Tariq Panja from The New York Times, and myself, Rob Harris from Sky News. And you can now watch us on YouTube and Spotify. Well, what a week it's been. The death of Pope Francis, really dominating global events, tributes from all the sports leaders, and a particular focus back on his homeland of Argentina as well, at his lifelong football club.
He's popularised, isn't he, in a Argentina football chant. Famously about Argentina has the Pope and Lionel Messi and Maradona.
Popes are quite football-y, aren't they?
Yeah, John Paul II played in goal. Pope Benedict was a Bayern Munich fan as well. So when Gianni Infantino paid tribute in particular, referencing how Pope Francis enjoyed football and how football can bring the world together.
No, it shows the popularity of football as well, and the fact that it makes people like popes more accessible to normal people in a sense, isn't it? That power of football really does go around the world. Probably more people would know, I guess, today, and maybe a controversial point, who knows, Cristiano Ronaldo than say the Pope. So that's the power of the game. If they can associate with it, more for them.
Well, in a minute, I'll tell you an interesting statistic about popes and football. But before we get to that, Rob, you uncovered some interesting developments around San Lorenzo, which was the Argentinian club that the Pope supported.
Yeah, the Pope was member 88,235, which has been pointed out. He died at 88 years old and at 2:35 a.m. Buenos Aires time by coincidence. And there were so many tributes. There were prayers immediately at the club. The club president, Marcello Moretti, was talking about his conversations with the Pope. He went to the Vatican last year to get permission to name a stadium after Francis. But then, within hours of his tribute on Argentine television, there was the leaked covert video recording posted of him allegedly stuffing his pockets with several $1,000s, alleged to have been received from a player's mother in exchange for signing her son.
I mean, incredible. What was his position, the guy? Who
Club president.
Club president. I mean, right to the very top.
He had a busy day then, with all the news with their most famous fan passing away, and then having to deal with the fallout of a major corruption scandal. Bit of a yin and a yang day for the president of San Lorenzo there. This, unfortunately, is commonplace in football, not necessarily only in Argentina. And we will be talking about football transfers and payments later on the pod.
Yes, involving a Premier League transfer to come. Stay tuned for that. But as for the club president, well, he was fighting on. And then on Wednesday night, the club held a mass in honour of Francis at the church, in fact, where the club was founded more than 130 years ago. It's nicknamed the Saints because a priest founded the club. But then at the same time, we had fans protesting as well outside the club's HQ, demanding his resignation. And after midnight came a post on X from the club president saying he was going to take a leave of absence to defend himself. He denies wrongdoing. He characterises it as a donation and saying that he's now going to defend himself in front of any inquirers.
Nothing saintly about allegedly being paid thousands of pesos or dollars. We don't know what the currency was in this case. This will rumble on.
Well, indeed. To go back to the statistics I talked about, Arsenal fans might be enthused by this. The last 3 times a Pope has died, that year an English club won the Champions League.
In the same season, that is, Pope Benedict, who had resigned years earlier, he died on December 31st, 2022. Manchester City went on to win the Champions League in May of 2023. Then if we go back to 2005, that's when Pope John Paul II died. Liverpool went on to win the Champions League. And in 1978, Liverpool also won the European Cup then.
Who do we have left? We've got Arsenal still in the competition for the Champions League. They're the only English competitors, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And if you want to read more about Pope and football, friend of the pod, Nick Harris has done a long Substack on this. This is on his Sporting Intelligence pod. And also, he wrote last week about that famous snooker final that was referenced here, the Dennis Taylor victory after midnight. So more on that on Nick's Substack. Is that all right, Nick?
Yeah, you forgot to credit him last week, as we do try to. Send in your articles maybe we should be discussing. Well, time of recording, we're still waiting for Pope Francis' funeral. One person who will be heading there will be Donald Trump, a trip to Europe, the first trip to Europe of his presidency. We're waiting to see when he'll be coming to the United Kingdom. We talk of him maybe coming to Scotland later this year. Would he be visiting his golf course, I wonder?
Sure he will, because things have moved on that front. For 2017, he resigned as a director of the company which operates Turnberry, the Scottish golf course. And he, for some reason, don't know why, but Companies House shows that yesterday he was appointed back again as a person with significant control, along with his son, Don Jr. So why he's decided he needs to be part of the significant control of the golf course remains to be seen. But I think it's an interesting one because this comes at a time where the RNA, who organised the Open tournament in Britain, are been talking about the possibility of taking the Open back there for the first time since 2009. And my understanding is that the government has actually contacted the RNA to ask them what the position is on this. So is this the government hoping to get some sort of another sort of thing to tempt Donald Trump to give a good tariff deal?
It's amazing he's got the time to be thinking about these golf tournaments, doesn't it? Thinking about, he was involved this past week on trying to end the war between Russia and Ukraine, the fallout from the tariffs, China. But you're talking about government to government potential involvement in getting the Open to his golf course. By the way, not the only Trump golf story this week. There was one that caught my eye, which was in the Sports Business Journal. Andrew Giuliani, the son of former mayor of New York, Rudy Giuliani, who's had a few legal issues himself of late. His son, Andrew, is, according to the SBJ, going to be made the head of the World Cup White House task force. Now, Andrew Giuliani, since his teen years, has also been a partner of Donald Trump on the golf course.
Interesting you mentioned Donald Trump as a golfer because his recent presidential medical talked about how he's got a great active lifestyle, including frequent victories in golf events.
He might have had 18 holes in one the first time he ever played golf. Am I mixing him up with another leader? It
reminds me of something fairly recently. I did a piece on how golf is used for diplomacy in the United States, particularly by Donald Trump, and John Bolton, his former national security advisor, was asked actually on Sky News what his piece of advice would be to the British Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, and it was take up golf.
Did he say take up golf and watch your opponent's ball closely to make sure it doesn't move?
Yeah, I'm surprised we've not seen any of the sports leaders playing golf yet or trying to. Imagine they're probably
But you can
getting the
imagine with
lessons.
some of these leaders with the approach Britain's been softly. So assume, Rob, a few gimmies from Keir Starmer on the putting green.
Yeah, well, you mentioned there, will the government potentially intervene to nudge the British Open to Turnberry? Any pressure on the RNA there? Well, how much separation should there be from the government and from sport, particularly when there's such a focus on the incoming so-called independent regulator for English men's football in England? And we now have the name of who the regulator will be, David Cogan. So, yeah, who is he?
Cogan, so to most people, he's by no means a household name. For those of us who've been covering the sort of business of sport for the last couple of decades, he's quite well known because he is the man who advised the Premier League for between 12 and 15 years on the TV rights and getting the best deal from Sky and other broadcasters. So a very sort of familiar name and a sort of familiar face in the background. He also went on to advise the EFL and the Women's Super League.
Yeah, David Cogan, I remember when I first started out, said if you want to know anything about the success of the Premier League's TV model, you've got to search this guy out. He helped kind of design the sales process, which has obviously been extremely successful. But it raises the question, doesn't it? Like, this is supposed to be the independent football regulator. This relationship between Cogan, particularly obviously in the Richard Scudamore years, the Premier League's boom years, if you want, like the growth years, he was a big part of that story. Is he too close, or could it be argued that this is someone who knows football really well? He's got expertise, and this is the sort of person you should have. So, what do you guys think?
Well, it's not someone who's already got a profile, and maybe some would have complained if it had been someone like Christian Purslow, who's very visible, and maybe he is the bureaucrat that is needed to navigate potentially tricky situations, complaints coming in from fans. He's obviously got to negotiate between the Premier League and the EFL potentially, or impose this deal in terms of the redistribution of income.
I've been speaking to a couple of club people who know him pretty well. I mean, interestingly, they say he knows a lot about the business of football. He's a smart businessman, but he's not a particular fan of the game. And it doesn't appear to have any particular sort of club. He certainly doesn't promote the club that he supports broadly. Nobody, if he does support a club, and people don't think he does particularly, he certainly keeps it close to his chest, which is interesting.
He's been planning for this moment throughout his entire life. Complete
exactly.
Neutrality.
I mean, he's not completely neutral politically. He's very close to the Labour Party, particularly the sort of New Labour.
Yeah.
On sort of close texting terms with Keir Starmer, other people at the top of the Labour Party. So I'm sure that's why he appealed to the government.
So do you think, given there was so much fan angst and anger, how we've got here, do you think there should be someone who has a sense of what fans feel football should be to be in this role? Because of what it means to everyone, or the fact he is just this kind of guy who's away from the game, doesn't have a feel for it. Is that better or worse? I
don't know. It's a good question. I don't think we will probably know the answer to that until we see how it develops. I mean, as I've said before, my view on it is I don't think the regulator's going to do much anyway. So whatever impact he has, I don't think is going to be particularly strong.
Can you tell us a little bit about the job and the salary?
Yeah, £130,000 a year for a 3-day week, which isn't, obviously by most people's standards is good.
Yeah.
By football standards is pretty low. And the key things they'll be doing is the owners and directors tests for clubs, and then also overseeing this potential financial settlement, the backstop power to impose a financial settlement on the Premier League and the EFL, which will be a thorny one. But the other thing somebody told me about what he was like, said he was had a very short fuse and could be very blunt. So sparks may fly, which could be fun.
It's good for us.
Yeah, for us.
Through.
David Cogan still has a confirmation hearing to come. He'll be questioned by MPs on the Culture, Media and Sport Committee. Some quite notable news from the Football Association this week. Long ban for discrimination for 13 matches for a League Two player.
Sam Finley, Tranmere Rovers. It's his third offence of aggravated abuse, basically, which is either racial or homophobic abuse. He used a homophobic insult against a player, having previously used a racist term in 2020 towards an Irish player, and then I think another homophobic term in 2016. So I think it's third time. So clearly the previous bans haven't been a deterrent enough, and he's done it again. 13 matches. I think that must be a record, certainly for this type of events.
It'll be interesting what the club does with him as well, because obviously you've said this is the third time he's done it. This is a player who's contracted to them, brought disgrace upon himself, but also the club. I wonder if the club will be thinking about other measures to move him on, or any sort of dismissal cases here.
Yeah, that's obviously something for the club to consider. Well, FIFA in 2019 actually toughened their regulations on the sanctions and have a minimum 10-game ban for any racism or homophobia. I suppose it touches on as well the issue from last week, how in Spain, Mapi Leon only received a 2-match ban for alleged transphobic comments, as well as inappropriate touching of parts of her opponent's body.
Huge focus on the Spanish Football Association and the Women's League there. Mapi Leon, as you just described that quite accurately there, she questioned her opponent's genitalia, didn't she? Allegedly, in her case, and a 2-game ban feels extremely light. But as you guys described earlier, this is the third strike against this particular player. But do you think a 13-game ban, the point of it is to also be a deterrent to others? And it might be, in this case, quite striking. You do wonder if such a large ban would be given to an elite player, say in the Premier League. I can think of the Luis Suarez case of racism when he was playing for Liverpool, which was proven by the FA. As far as it was concerned, he denied it, when he was alleged to have racially abused Patrice Evra at Man United and got an 8-game ban. So that was also, I guess, quite severe.
And whether we'll see stadium closures, partial stadium closures in English football for homophobia and racism, it's something that is often called for abroad, but doesn't happen in this country. Well, that's one investigation that the FA have been conducting. A very long-standing one has been into a particular agent. And this week, Martyn, you've uncovered new details about this agent, alleged about why Eden Hazard didn't join Manchester United in 2012.
This investigation we've talked about several times, how Chelsea's new owners self-reported irregular payments relating to transfers. And the Bureau of Investigative Journalism and Guardian reported in 2023 that Eden Hazard's agent, John Biko, received €7 million from an Abramovich-owned offshore company to a Dubai company. John Biko was Hazard's agent at the time of that he moved to Chelsea. Just before that, I've reported this week, Manchester United agreed personal terms, agreed a transfer fee. Alex Ferguson had made him his top target. Hazard had said how flattered he was by the attention. So Biko met club officials and demanded €7 million, basically, be paid to him, which was something like 20% of the transfer fee. Manchester United said that was far too much. So he said, do it this way, give me €1 million through the club and then pay me 6 million separately. Via the owners, offshore deals, whatever. Manchester United said no, we couldn't do that, it was in breach of the rules. and that was it. They didn't hear any more. They lost out on the transfer. Next thing they know, he's joined Chelsea.
And Chelsea's investigation, the Premier League one, is related to a bunch of these payments. I guess whether it's this one or others, it's not the only one. And I understand that the Chelsea case is taking a bit longer than they had anticipated as well. You do wonder how much the Premier League has now found. And when you put that in context of how long it went on for, several years, and then place that alongside the Manchester City case, which is about payments in one sense as well, it does raise the question of what. Yes, they've self-reported, but if this is a years-long program of deception, allegedly, should the sanctions be quite severe in Chelsea's case as well?
And as we discussed previously on the pod, how much should the new ownership have to pay the price for any alleged wrongdoing by a previous ownership when this was not the reason that the club was sold in any way, and they themselves
but it is arguably
came
the
forward
reason
with
why
that
the club
information.
Is extremely successful and is big and is now one of the world's leading clubs. Like, there'll be younger listeners will think Chelsea have been this enormous global powerhouse club. Don't forget, before Roman Abramovich came, for decades before that, Chelsea were another team in the Premier League. And when I was a kid, they were going up and down the division between the old First Division and the second tier. So you could say, is it their fault or the owner's fault? But they did benefit massively as a result of some of this stuff, and that's important to note.
Yeah, you can make the case, how successful would they have been without Eden Hazard? I mean, he was seen as the best player in England, wasn't he? Certainly, won a couple of those awards, won 2 Premier League titles with them. If he'd been at Manchester United, would that have been different?
Well, it might have helped Man United. I think they've only won one more league title, I think, in 2013. That was Alex Ferguson's last season. So they might have staved off this enormous decline we've seen in recent times with maybe another title or two. It certainly would have helped David Moyes once he replaced Sir Alex if he had Eden Hazard in that team.
But what about John Beeko himself? Have you managed to hear from him? Or is he contactable
actually,
at the moment?
He sort of disappeared off the radar, split with Hazard in 2014, became the owner, chairman and manager, all three, of a second division team in Belgium. That they did quite well, but actually they refused a license to be promoted due to financial irregularities, went bust, went out of existence after 69 years. He disappeared off the radar and then resurfaced because he was extradited from the UAE to Belgium in October last year, and he is now subject to money laundering and fraud, forgery or fraud charges in Belgium. So that case is still outstanding.
But now Beeko's back in Belgium. So how hard was it to get the story over the line, given the fact you couldn't speak to him? Did you get hold of the Belgium FA?
The Belgian federal prosecutor, with help from my good friend and colleague, Samendra Kunti, who is a freelancer based in Belgium. He managed to access some people within the federal prosecutor's department and law enforcement, and was able to get some information from them, which that helped it across the line. He's never talked about it at all. I did have a number for him, so I sent a message, and I just got a reply saying, "This is not John Beeko." So whether it was or not.
It's interesting whoever it is has kept that line open, because there might be another deal to be done. You stumble into a football agent's phone and you're like, oh. Yeah.
All the numbers being reassigned. Well, he can always contact us on social media if he wants to. We're at Sport Unlocked on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky, and X. We're still posting on X.
No,
Tariq, you're not, though.
And I must say,
personally,
X, or I'll call it Twitter because that's what I've joined. And when the platform first appeared, I think I must have been just after the South Africa World Cup. I think I might have joined
before, right?
Around that period of time. Yeah, it might have been before the South Africa World Cup in 2010, and it was really good. Great source of information, great way to get your stories out, great way to share information, meet new people. in the industry. And then it's just become really dark, to be honest, under Elon Musk, the lack of moderation. And yeah, for me, it doesn't work anymore. So I'm out.
We've seen various media outlets have announced they're no longer on X. Guardian are one of them, but football at a top level, certainly in England, has not distanced itself from X. The Premier League actually posts VAR decisions on a special account on X. But we have heard this week from the London Marathon organisers, and they say that they've been boycotting it over the descent into the gutter under Elon Musk. They've announced this boycott, although no one seemed to notice until they announced it ahead of the marathon this weekend.
Eilish McColgan, Liz, whose mother was one of the greatest British long-distance runners, she's faced a torrent of abuse on X and on social media platforms. And I wonder if it's a function of her as well. She's looking to break her mum's marathon record, and it would be a big story in the UK if she managed to do that, whether these two things have come together. Yeah,
it was comments about her anorexia, a really tough fight, and people making horrifically abusive comments and making the suffering even harder. Interestingly, there was a post on LinkedIn from Mark Gilbert. He used to be head of digital at the Football Association. He launched the England team channels across social media. He's been reflecting about how more and more clients are asking whether it's time to reduce their focus on X or leave it entirely. He talks about being a tough call to make because the London Marathon had almost 200,000 followers. So there are also commercial considerations that he raises there because, of course, there's money to be made and some sponsors do want that extra visibility as well. What he says is by distancing itself from a platform perceived as fostering negativity, the London Marathon reinforces its commitment to positivity and community engagement. But he says abuse exists on other channels, and the way to mitigate it is to create and introduce a community management strategy. And obviously he's perhaps promoting some of his work. And I suppose Martyn, myself, we're both still posting on X. I largely just post links, in part because actually the algorithm downgrades posts as well, because it's all focused on some of these more perhaps dubious paid for accounts now these days.
But I moved to Blue Sky, like an alternative platform, and I can say it's arrived because for the first time I've been called a on Blue Sky. So surely that's the sign of arrival for a new platform. Rob, you can delete that if you want.
And Tariq, there's something about the New York Times and Blue Sky because they have been given permission to verify their users. There's going to be some self-verification within organisations.
Right, yeah. Again, and that's one of the things Eilish McColgan actually was talking about. She said she wanted social media posters to have to go through identification checks, so all of the people who are posting some of the horrific abuse can be identified, and maybe that will be a deterrent.
One technical thing, Blue Sky doesn't have notifications. They are quite handy on X still to see various announcements and bits of breaking news. And still at Martyn Ziegler on X.
Still there? Yeah. Again, I mostly post links rather than... I used to post bad jokes. Don't really do that anymore. Sad.
So you're actually helping X.
You save them for us, Ziggs. You save those bad jokes for us and the pod listeners.
But it's marathon weekend in London, and we touched on it a couple of weeks ago. Beijing was due to stage a human versus robot race. Didn't go ahead due to concerns about the weather. Don't know if the robots would fall over. But it has finally taken place.
Can't keep a good robot down for long. Certainly not in China.
Maybe they'll be the Laureus winner next year.
Yeah, exactly.
Technology is going mad. Have you seen this in the Super Classico in Argentina this weekend? River Plate, 85,000 home fans because there's no away fans. They're not having tickets, having facial recognition technology. I can't see that going down well in British football.
There'd be huge opposition here for that, although it makes life easier, doesn't it, going into the stadium?
Although I do remember 2017 Champions League final, South Wales Police used facial recognition technology to try and identify criminals from all the people going in, and they admitted afterwards that they had 2,000 people were wrongly identified as being criminals. So
wow.
Plenty of scope for errors.
Well, that's about it for this week's episode. As ever, you can message us on all the social platforms, and there's also a WhatsApp channel as well where you can get updates too. Now, thank you for listening. Goodbye.